I'm Emma Adler and I'm doing my Storyteller project on the Moray. Who is Moray? The Moray are the Fates. They were three goddesses of destiny in Greek mythology. Their names were Clotho, Spinner, Lachesis, the Laughter, and Atropos, the Inflexible. They controlled the life and destiny of everyone. The Moray roles. Clotho, the Spinner, spun the thread of life. Lachesis, the Laughter, was the apportioner of lots, and Atropos, the Inflexible, was the leader. The Moray were described as ugly old women and sometimes lame. They were severe, inflexible, and stern. The Moray were depicted as elderly women, and were named as Clotho, Lachesis, and Atropos. Clotho was said to spin the thread of life, Lachesis would decide on how long this thread of life would be, and Atropos would cut the thread to bring the life to an end. Thus the Moray can be perceived as both the Greek goddesses of birth, but also goddesses of death. The Moray were the three goddesses of fate, who personified the inescapable destiny of man. They assigned to every person his or her fate, or share, in the scheme of things. Their name means parts, shares, or allotted portion. The individuals were Clotho, who spun the thread of life, Lachesis, who measured it, and Atropos, who cut it short. Zeus Moergetes was their leader. In stories from ancient Greece, the Moray were thought to be aligned with the wishes of Zeus. Indeed, the supreme god was given the title of Zeus Moergetes, leader of the Fates. This suggested that Zeus could guide the Moray in their plans. Clotho was also known by the name of Spinner because it was her duty to spin the thread of a person's life from her distaff directly to her spindle. She also made major decisions, for instance when a person was to be born. This allowed her to choose who was born, but also when gods or mortals were to be saved or put to death. Once this task had been performed, Lachesis always dressed in white, and she was in charge of its measurements. According to every person's length of thread, their lifespans were different. This would represent destiny, and she was in charge of deciding how much time of life was to be allotted to each person. It is also believed that she was in charge of choosing the fate of every person once the thread had been measured. Atropos was the oldest of the three, and she was known as the Inevitable. She was closely related to the people of death, since it was Atropos who would choose the mechanism of death. It was her task to end the life of mortals by cutting their threads. It was believed that the Fates would appear within 3 days of someone's birth to decide their fate. The three Moray represented the cycle of life, essentially standing for birth, life, and death. They would spin, draw out, and cut the threads of life. Unlike the Hooray, their siblings, the Moray, were depicted as ugly old women, but also as stem, inflexible, and severe, thus making people fear their own destiny.
When death approaches others, it is the three goddesses' task to ensure their fate is met out accordingly. They are believed to sing in harmony with the sirens as death approaches. Clotho represents the thread of life, which begins at the life of a mortal, and is the spinner of the thread. Lachesis was the dealer of lots. Her people were given chances in life. She measured the thread of life. Atropos is the smallest and most fearsome of the three, and represents the irrevocable fate that people await. She was the one who cut the thread at a mortal's death. It was a task of the Moray to shadow the life of human beings from birth to death. Not even the gods had the power to decide the fate. Even Zeus was reluctant to disturb the natural order of the world. The only time the Moray were toiled in their task was by a physician named Asclepius, the son of Apollo. Asclepius revoked a man by bringing him back from death. In turn, the Moray persuaded Zeus to kill Asclepius with a thunderbolt. It was believed that during battles, the Moray were seen hovering over the doomed mortals, ready to ensure their fate was complete. They killed the wounded and drank their blood. Some even refer to them as the dogs of Hades.